Hi everyone and welcome back. Today's story is one of the most shocking family murder cases in American history. The brutal and cold-blooded killing of Franklin Bradshaw, a wealthy Utah businessman in 1978. But this wasn't a random act of violence. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was something far darker. It was a murder engineered by his own daughter, driven by greed, power, and emotional manipulation that would tear an entire family apart. This is the story of how a mother manipulated her teenage son to commit murder, and how one of America's wealthiest families became the center of a chilling true crime saga. Part 1. Who was Franklin Bradshaw? Franklin Bradshaw was born in 1889 and built a reputation as a shrewd and successful businessman in Salt Lake City, Utah. He owned Bradshaw Auto Parts, a thriving company that made him a multimillionaire by the 1970s. But despite his success, Franklin lived modestly. He was known for being hardworking, disciplined, and frugal. Family meant everything to him, especially his grandchildren. Franklin's wife, Bessie, had passed away years earlier, and much of his emotional focus shifted toward his children and grandchildren, particularly his daughter, Frances Schreuder, a glamorous, ambitious woman who had moved to New York City in pursuit of high society life. What Franklin didn't know was that Frances's lifestyle in Manhattan would soon lead to the darkest chapter of his life. Part 2. Frances Schreuder. The socialite daughter Frances Bradshaw Schreuder was everything her father wasn't. She was bold, extravagant, and obsessed with wealth and status. Living in a luxurious Manhattan apartment, Frances mingled with the city's elite, pretending to be part of New York's upper class. She enrolled her children in expensive private schools and attended the finest events, all funded by the money her father sent her. But her spending spiraled out of control. She had no income, no job, and no plan, except to keep extracting money from her father. Franklin, known for his tight financial discipline, began to grow frustrated. He started reducing Frances's allowance, believing she needed to live more responsibly. To Frances, this was unacceptable. She believed she was entitled to his fortune, and when she feared that her inheritance might disappear, she began to plan something unthinkable. Part 3. The manipulation begins. Frances was manipulative, not just with her father, but with her own children. She had 3 kids, Mark, Larry, and Larry's younger brother, Stephen. Mark, her eldest son, was quiet, intelligent, and emotionally fragile. Frances controlled him completely, psychologically, emotionally, and financially. When she learned that Franklin was planning to change his will, potentially cutting her off, she began poisoning Mark's mind. She told him lies, that Franklin was planning to ruin their lives, that he didn't love them, that everything they had would be taken away. Frances painted her father as a cruel man who wanted to destroy their family, and that the only way to stop him was to eliminate him. Over time, Mark became convinced that killing his grandfather wasn't just acceptable, it was necessary. This slow, calculated manipulation would culminate in one of the most disturbing family crimes in U.S. history. Part 4. The murder. It was July 23, 1978, a hot summer day in Salt Lake City. Franklin Bradshaw, now 86 years old, was at his auto parts store as usual. He was working in the back when his teenage grandson, Mark Schreuder, entered the shop. Mark approached his grandfather calmly, and then in cold blood shot him in the back of the head. Franklin died instantly. Mark fled the scene, shaken but silent. He returned to New York soon after. For months, the murder went unsolved. Police found no sign of forced entry, no robbery, no motive. Franklin's cash and belongings were untouched. It looked like an execution, but by whom? The mystery deepened as investigators dug into Franklin's personal life and found tension between him and his daughter, Frances. Then came the breakthrough. Part 5. The investigation detectives began to notice inconsistencies in the family's statements. Frances's behavior after the murder was strangely detached, and she was more interested in her father's will than his death. Investigators learned that Frances had been pressuring Franklin for money for years, and that she had spoken of inheriting his fortune long before his death. Eventually, through interviews, letters, and recorded phone calls, the police uncovered the horrifying truth. Frances had orchestrated the murder. Mark confessed under immense emotional pressure. He told investigators that his mother had manipulated him for years, that she told him killing his grandfather was an act of loyalty. In one recorded conversation, Frances even told Mark, "If you don't do this, we'll lose everything. He's destroying us." It was emotional blackmail, and it worked. Part 6, the trials. The case shocked the nation. A wealthy, elegant New York socialite had manipulated her teenage son into murdering his own grandfather, all for money. Mark was charged and convicted of second-degree murder, but it was clear to everyone that he had acted under his mother's influence. He served a relatively short prison sentence and was eventually paroled. Frances's trial became a media spectacle. Prosecutors described her as cold, controlling, and narcissistic, a woman who valued status and wealth over human life. During the trial, psychiatrists testified that Frances exhibited signs of narcissistic personality disorder and that her obsession with money and power consumed her. She was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy and sentenced to life in prison. Despite multiple appeals, her conviction stood. Frances Schreuder spent years behind bars before dying in prison in 2004. Part 7. The aftermath. The murder of Franklin Bradshaw left a permanent scar on the family. His legacy, once tied to hard work and integrity, was forever tainted by greed and betrayal. Mark, who had been a victim of psychological control, spent much of his life trying to recover from the trauma of what his mother made him do. The case became one of America's most infamous examples of maternal manipulation, the kind that twists love into control and turns family loyalty into tragedy. Books, documentaries, and films were made about the case, including at Mother's request, which dramatized the horrifying events. Part 8. Why this case still haunts us. The Franklin Bradshaw murder wasn't just about greed. It was about the dark potential of psychological manipulation. It forced people to confront a chilling question: how far will someone go for money, and what happens when a parent uses love as a weapon? Frances Schreuder's story reminds us that evil doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it hides behind a smile, a kind word, or the voice of someone who says they love you. Franklin Bradshaw was killed by his own bloodline, not out of hate, but out of corrupted ambition. And that's what makes this story one of the most tragic crimes in American history. Thank you for watching. If you found this deep dive into one of America's darkest family crimes compelling, make sure to subscribe for more stories of greed, mystery, and hidden truth. Because sometimes the scariest monsters aren't in the shadows. They're sitting right across the dinner table.